In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about creating input fields. This is just going to go over how to create them and change the look of them, nothing about how to program them. This should be the last video if you've been following through the videos on setting up a new project and setting up the various UI elements. This is the last one kind of in that series. There will be other videos that talk about different things, but this is the last as far as the basics of beginning a project. So there'll be one about making builds. There'll be one about doing a little bit of light programming as far as like your buttons go, but this is the last for beginning things. So we create input fields just like we've created our other UI elements. I'm going to go to my main panel. I'm going to right click UI and choose just the regular input field, not the Text Mesh Pro one, input field. And then we'll populate it onto my canvas for me. And it's actually on top of this main panel, which is where I wanted it to be in case I needed to move it. Because again, another nice thing about using panels is if we needed to hide our UI, if we just turn our panel off, deactivate it, it also hides all the children. So this is an easy way that if we needed to have multiple UI panels that do different things, if you put your UI elements on a panel, we can in code turn these panels on and off. So maybe this is like my start panel, maybe I have a game over panel that turns on only when you die. It's just a nice way to house your UI elements. So as far as input fields go, just like our other UI elements, the first thing you should probably do is rename it. That way it'll be easier to find in your hierarchy and if you need to use it in code. So I might just call this one like my first input. Maybe I'm going to have multiple inputs. Just something so it kind of differentiates it from the others. If you do need to change the size of this, maybe it needs to be wider, maybe it needs to be taller, do not change the scale. Again, just like all of our other UI elements, you should never use the scale. We need to use the rect tool so that we can adjust the size of it, because scaling is going to make it look really bad. And you will probably lose points on any project that you submit that has scaled UI elements rather than using the rect tool to change sizes of them. Another thing we can change outright with our input field is going to be the color of it. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mess too much with the color of input fields. Everyone's kind of expecting a certain look with input fields where, the white input field. But if you do need to change the color, you can if you need to. But you might not really want to. It might make it hard to use this. The other important thing that you do want to make sure that you're thinking about, maybe you don't actually need to change it, but you should think about it when you create these, is what kind of input are you trying to read in? Are you trying to read in a number? Are you trying to read in some kind of text? What exactly is your user going to input? Because if it's going to be a number, you probably want to limit the type of input that these input fields take. And we can do that over here. If it's selected in our hierarchy, if we go to the input field component and we look for this content type, by default it's set to standard, and that means you can type whatever you want in there. So like if you just want text, it doesn't matter. You don't have to change that. But if we needed to do something such as enter an age, we could limit it to integer numbers, and you would only be able to then put in whole numbers. Do you want to limit it to a decimal number? Maybe it's for like a bank account where you're supposed to put in how much money you want. We can limit it to a decimal number. There's other things you can limit it to, but honestly, for our classes, you will probably just keep it on standard or change it to integer or change it to decimal number. So be aware that these exist. So I'm actually going to change it to integer number because I want somebody to enter their age. And once you get past like 5 or 6 years old, you probably don't tell people that you're, for instance, 24 and a half years old. You say you're 24 years old. So an integer number is perfectly fine for entering in an age. We would then probably want to change the text down here, because right now it says enter text, but if you wanted your user to enter an age, it would probably be better for it to say enter your age as its default in this window. So if we come over to the hierarchy, notice that this does have children with it. Similar to how the button had a text child, if we open this up, it actually has two text children. The first one is placeholder text, and this is how we would change the look of this placeholder text. That's why it's called placeholder. This is just a text object, so we manipulate this like any other text object. So rather than enter text, we could change this to enter age. We can make it bigger. It's kind of like this nice italicness. You know, it doesn't hurt to keep it that way because it is just placeholder. It's going to disappear. That's also why the color of it is slightly transparent, because it looks a little bit more like what you're used to with input fields like on a website. But you can alter this if you do need to. The other thing you might want to change to is this text object. This text object is going to be the look of your inputted stuff. So you can't really, it kind of sucks that you can't really tell here what it looks like, because if you enter stuff, it just disappears. But if you hit play, you can come in here and type in, it's alphanumeric. So you can see what it looks like. Actually, maybe that was my problem. Let me go to my text object. Can I do this? 1111. No, it still doesn't like that. So yeah, you do have to come in and hit play and enter in your text. But you know, there's a big difference between that and this. So you probably want to make sure that whatever your placeholder is, you change your regular text to that too. At least the font size and like its alignment, so it lines up nicer. So now if I come in here and type stuff, it looks consistent. And that's it. As far as input fields and setting up the look of them, that's all you really have to it. The big takeaways for this one, change that placeholder text to make sense for whatever you want the user to input. And if you do need to change the input type, it might be in your best interest for coding reasons to change it, the content type to, you know, closer to what you need. Do you need an integer? Do you need a decimal? Does it not matter? Because you really, if you're expecting some numbers in there and a user puts in a bunch of letters, it could potentially break your code. So keep that in mind.